Good afternoon. This is Alan Rosinski of Metro Manhattan Office Space. I want to start this video differently today by asking my viewers a few questions. Many of you now work remotely but once had jobs in an office. I'd like to know what you would do if your employer forced you to return to the office. Would you be happy or would you quit? Second of all, do you think you and your coworkers are less efficient working from home? We have 21,000 subscribers on this channel, and your answers could say a lot about New York City's future, so I'd really appreciate your input, especially as we head into a recession with the pandemic's impact on commercial real estate waning. No matter how desperately Democrats attempt to put a positive spin on the economy before the midterm elections, inflation remains out of control, and the GDP has declined for 2 straight quarters. We are in the early stages of a recession, and the effects on New York City's commercial office space and retail space market will be notable. However, one thing to consider is that a recession counterintuitively could be good for New York City's commercial real estate. A higher unemployment rate could shift the balance of power in favor of employers. The remote work era could be dead forever, with employers insisting that employees return to the office, or else. But before we talk hypotheticals and scenarios, let's talk about the here and now. Despite the cooling 8.3% CPI inflation rate, real estate-related costs are surging. Core inflation, which excludes food and energy costs, rose 6.3% in August from July's 5.9% increase. Roughly 40% of this increase is due to costs lumped into the shelter cost category. These include mortgage payments, rent, property taxes, electricity, fuel, heating oil, water, gas, and garbage collection services. These surging costs affect New York City office space tenants and landlords and could be nowhere near cooling. Of course, nobody has a crystal ball, but the impact could be drastic. If you want to try and gauge a recession's impact on New York City commercial real estate, try to find parallels between 2022 and the previous 2 recessions in 2008 and 2020. Both recessions were different in their cause and effect, yet they had a similar impact on businesses going under, unemployment, and Manhattan commercial real estate occupancy rates and prices. First, let's discuss the 2008 financial crisis. New York City was not as impacted by the housing bubble and subsequent financial crisis in 2008. The trouble began when the housing bubble burst in markets like Miami and Las Vegas. The situation soon could spread to New York City's financial and commercial real estate sector. The financial sector triggered the meltdown. Many of New York City's largest banks were stuck with more debt than they could handle, thanks to subprime mortgages. Names like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers may ring a bell. With the city's private sector losing about 100,000 jobs, the New York City commercial real estate market tanked. Prices for office space fell across the board. Midtown Class A office vacancy rates rose above 12% and nearly doubled from the previous year. What's alarming today is that in 2008, construction froze when mortgage rates rose to 6.03%. Today, commercial mortgage rates stand around 5.57%, the highest since the 6.03 figure. We might not be approaching a financial meltdown like the financial crisis. However, there are concerning parallels. The positive, though, is that bank regulations are tighter nowadays. Financial institutions are not as reckless with lending as they once were. Now let's consider the impact of the 2020 COVID pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic caused real estate sectors like office and retail to grind to a halt. Articles like New York City is dead forever were picked up by the New York Post. Written by author, comedy club owner, and former hedge fund manager James Altucher, he made some rather dramatic and disturbing statements. The overarching theme was that New York City, the center of the financial universe, has seen tough times but has always bounced back throughout history. But the pandemic shutdowns of 2020 were something different. Not even during the Great Depression, the crime waves, and stagflation of the 1970s or the financial crisis of 2008 was New York City as dead as it was in 2020. Tucker mentioned how New York City looked like a ghost town. Midtown Manhattan seemed like an abandoned steel town in the Rust Belt. Prime office real estate, like the Time Life building, sat 90% vacant, and the unemployment rate in New York City hit a record high of 16.5%. Beyond the office closures, relocations, and downsizing, prime Manhattan retailers like Brooks Brothers, JCPenney, Neiman Marcus, and J.Crew filed for bankruptcy. It's unlikely we'll ever go through a sudden economic shock like COVID-19 again, but if this recession worsens, many office tenants in New York City would continue shifting priorities based on the economic climate and changing business needs. So here's where we stand today. As we mentioned earlier, there's a tug of war between employers and employees, with remote work still the norm. Employees have the leverage, but a recession could squeeze the labor market and counterintuitively benefit New York City commercial real estate. A higher unemployment rate could shift the balance of power in favor of employers. They could very well insist that employees return to the office or suffer the consequences. 2020's freeze in New York City commercial real estate, followed by zero interest rates and a frenzied flight to quality, has eerie similarities to the 2007 boom period preceding the financial crisis. Manhattan office leasing, after all, nearly doubled in July 2022 from the previous year. On the one hand, rising rates sidelined potential buyers and deals. On the other hand, many lenders rushed to get a mortgage before rates further increase. There's also an imbalance between struggling older Class B and C office spaces and flourishing modern Class A office spaces. Class A Manhattan office leasing exceeded pre-pandemic figures a year ago. Once a recession worsens, office space and retail asking rents may fall, vacancy rates could rise, and unemployment will inevitably increase. However, two conflicting forces will affect the market for office space. On the one hand, there will be a reduction in demand because of companies looking to downsize. Simultaneously, on the other hand, empowered employers with renewed leverage will increase demand by ordering employees back to the office. Increased foot traffic in business districts could also increase the value of retail space in these areas. But no matter which force wins out, the return to the office will mitigate the recession's effects, even if it's a partial return. Consider pent-up demand for office and retail space as well. New startups and co-working space, for example, might need more space. They could take advantage of lower rents to move to private demised offices. At the same time, uncertainty could benefit the co-working sector. Companies unsure of what to expect in the market may end up leasing short-term temporary space. Out-of-town retailers looking to set up shop in Manhattan could also jump at the opportunity of lower rents. These are very confusing times. If you were a commercial tenant in New York City with a lease expiration in the next year or so, multiple forces are pushing and pulling the market. Commercial real estate sectors also perform differently depending on asset class and neighborhood. I'd strongly recommend that you explore your options well before your lease expires and reach out to an experienced New York City commercial real estate broker to discuss your needs and options. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please remember to hit the subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. Until the next time. If you found this content interesting or helpful, I'd be happy if you subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can always find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @MetroManhattan. Until the next time.